Hello and welcome to In Conversation. I'm Natasha Kati Chandra and I'm the Artistic Director at Tara Theatre.
I'm Hunia Chawla and I'm the playwright and producer of Permission.
Welcome, Hunia. It's really lovely to have you here. So my first question is, what is the key inspiration behind Permission and what led to its conception?
So Permission is partly inspired by my own journey. I grew up in Karachi and then I came to the UK on my own. I came here for uni and stayed on. And this whole journey from living in Pakistan in post-war on terror times to seeing this new wave of feminism with the Aurat March and then being part of this like upflux of women moving abroad seeking freedom, it really made me when I came here I started questioning while I was going through the immigration process, how free are we really?
Yeah.
And are we really as safe as we think we are? And that realization came when I found myself on like various picket lines while living in London during COVID, and just there's so much that's happened in the past like 5-10 years politically. And so this question about what does liberation mean and who gets to define it was really interesting for me, which is why I came to writing Permission.
I think as well, nowadays there's something really interesting about the questions and the conversations happening around protesting. Obviously what's really interesting for me is where women sit in the conversation around protesting, and when conflict and war and violence breaks out, who are on the receiving end, who are the majority community of people who are on the receiving end of what happens. And usually women's safety is what comes to the fore in all of these conversations. So where we're currently in the times that we're living, what do you think are our rights to protest? Do we have the right to protest as migrants, and to what extent do you feel that they're conditional?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in theory, in the UK, we have the right to protest. We have freedom of speech. But in practice, it looks quite different, especially given the recent changes in the law with the Public Order Act, which gives the police so much authority to just arrest people for whatever they classify as severe disruption. I think the stakes for immigrants are different. And it's interesting when you compare protests in Pakistan and protests in the UK, and you think, oh, Pakistan is like a sort of global south, third world country, and so, that's way more dangerous, or it's clamped down more. But actually, there are a lot of parallels, and it's just that what is acceptable to say is just different in both places. So I think it is highly conditional, and I think for immigrants specifically, and I mean, I can probably just speak to my own experience, there is this pressure to have good character. You're constantly proving your good character because you're in this like grueling immigration process where you want that passport, and that passport is the freedom, access to the world, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be on your best behavior, and so you can't be seen on the picket line, or you don't want to be the one in front of the police whenever they say, oh, this is severe disruption. So yeah, I think it's very intersectional. Obviously when I think of protests in Pakistan, like I'm thinking recently there was a clampdown on protesters protesting against the state's violence against Balochis. When it comes to the Aurat March, that's sort of, it's happening, women are out on the streets, but then you see counter protesters sort of hampering that movement, whereas like a more identity politics led protest in the UK would be welcome. So a women's march in the UK wouldn't be as controversial as a protest against state violence. And I think that raises a very interesting question about how we've segregated identity politics from the messier world of borders and state violence, and they're so connected, right? Yeah. Like when we think of Afghan women, for example, and we rightfully condemn the fact that the veil is forced upon them, which is a big discussion in the feminist world, in the global north especially. we somehow remove the fact that the same sort of saving Afghan women from the Taliban is used to justify the same women's families and homes. So really, where do we stand? Do we really care about the women, or are we not? We don't see it holistically, basically. So I think these two things need to be seen hand in hand to actually push the needle in the direction of liberation for women, for immigrants, and for anyone who's on that side of injustice in general.
I think one of the things that I think about a lot is when you look at women and where we sit in the narrative, and this concept of women's safety, and you talk a lot about, you mentioned as well this concept of a protest here in the UK and a protest over there in Pakistan or in India or other parts of the world, and somehow there is this understanding that people are a lot more, it is safer to protest. And similarly, I can draw parallels between this understanding that people do think that women have more rights in the global north or in other parts of the world, and countries in the global south or developing countries, women have less rights. But as again you said, the conversation's so intersectional, it's so nuanced. When you're a South Asian woman, when you're a migrant woman, when you class something as rights, what does that mean? And I think I was having a conversation with someone the other day about the statistics as well around safety and the amount of kind of sexual assault and things like that. And there's the reality of it is that statistically it isn't that different, or at least the justice as well of the perpetrator isn't brought so much to the front. Like as well, there's so much conversation around a show that recently was out on Netflix, which was very much led by a young boy. So it was, adolescence. It was about a young boy and the impact it had on him and the impact it had on his family. And I'm like, where are the stories about the impact that, being assaulted or kind of experiencing something like that? What about her family? What about her narrative? And somehow there isn't a lot of that out, or that it tends to be dominated by, I find the conversation around feminism sometimes is very much dominated by people who are not of global majority heritage. And that as well makes it really difficult makes it very difficult for me to sometimes stand with in solidarity, because it doesn't examine the nuances. Which brings me a little bit to perhaps the similarities or the differences between, for you in your experience and how you've written Permission, because it is showing that duality. It sort of runs parallel, a protest happening here and a protest happening in Pakistan. What from your experience, or when you were writing it, what were you hoping to showcase in terms of the similarities between protesting when you're women here or when you're protesting back home, the similarities and even maybe the differences?
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of like global north liberal Western feminism is about sexuality, like freedom around sexuality and freedom around clothing of women, and like what's conceived as the progressive way to do both those things. And a lot of that has been sort of like filtered into, at least like in Pakistan, a lot of people my age or in my circles, and again it's intersection, it's a class thing also, were fed a lot of Hollywood. And so there's like with sexuality, for example, and that's something that's examined in the play. There's this pressure that one of the characters is feeling to be sexually active, and maybe when they're not ready to do so, and that's something maybe that's similar in Western feminism as it is in like back home, in the sense that, do we engage with these things on our terms, or has our feminism suddenly been used to make us feel pressure to be liberated in very specific ways? So there is a lot of like similarities in how feminisms of both worlds are still struggling with the same things. On the other hand, like, there's a lack of examination of intersectionality and how sometimes tradition and culture aren't always
Yeah.
oppressive, right? And like I often give this example. In fact, this was part of the first 20-minute version of this play back in the day as well, of like Bend It Like Beckham, which is a movie I really enjoy. But there's so many narratives like this, where there's this like South Asian girl who's from a very traditional family, and then she's enlightened by Western liberalism, and then someone comes and saves her from the hold of her family, and she's emancipated. And this narrative is so overdone, it's so reductive, and it's people really believe it. I like you start believing it about yourself too after you watch it enough times. So a lot of Permission is trying to debunk that myth, add a bit more nuance to it, and try to see the oppressions and freedoms of both worlds, and finding what works for us somewhere in between.
Yeah, you make such a good point. I remember when Bend It Like Beckham came to the cinemas in India, because I grew up in India. I know we have this in common. You grew up in Pakistan and I grew up in India. And I remember watching it as someone who was growing up in India and not understanding why, at that moment, why it was funny or what the humor was. But very much as I got older and then obviously moved here or moved back here or whatever that narrative is, it's again very complicated, was this really interesting concept of, oh, right, okay, so this sort of identity, what is British South Asian identity or British Indian identity, and how does that compare to somebody like me, and what box do I sit in because I don't have these things in common. And the other thing I found really fascinating is, obviously living in India, I had a lot of different types of friends from different backgrounds. I had Muslim friends as well, and you know, there were these really interesting conversations about the hijab or wearing headscarves, and exactly what you said about sometimes culture and religion isn't oppressive in the way that people look in, so they're looking in from the outside think. Yeah. And when I moved to the UK, I went to Oldham, which is a really large South Asian population from Pakistan, from Bangladesh. And I grew up with this very basic sort of, oh my God, if a girl's wearing a hijab, then she's being forced to wear a hijab. And I was obviously very young at the time, and I had this very uninformed opinion of it. But then I met these incredible young girls when I went to college who actively made a choice to wear a hijab, who did it in such beautiful ways. It was so much part of their identity, part of their style, part of their culture, and they were so proud of it, and it completely made me change my view of my view on it, but also where is this narrative coming from around, if a woman's wearing a headscarf, it is automatically someone's forcing her to do it. And it's exactly what you said, a lot of this sort of liberal global north sort of feminism is about that. And actually there was a lot of confusion for me, having grown up in a specific culture and then coming here, and there was some sort of weird pressure to be like, oh, am I not a liberated woman because I'm actively choosing to not actively, I don't know, date a boy or whatever. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So it raised some really interesting things for me, maybe not interesting, maybe problematic as well, where I really started to question lots of things. But I think that's exactly it. There's lots of people from the outside looking in who have this opinion, and absolutely Permission tries to debunk that in a very brilliant way, might I add. So my next question is, because you talk so much about these characters, is there a character you've written into Permission that you feel that you relate to the most, or is it elements of both the characters?
I think it is elements of both the characters. It's funny because when in the very early days of the play, when it was a one-woman stand-up, like 20-minute show, I basically wrote myself into a play. I was like a new writer, that's what you do, write about yourself. But since then, like, the characters are like so far removed from me, and I feel like I oscillate between Minza and Hanna. So some days I'm Minza. I'm like level-headed. I know, like, I think diplomatically. I think conversation is the way forward. You work together as a community. You speak to each other. That's how resolution is found. Sometimes I'm Hanna, and I'm like, we need to F shit up, and we need direct action. And, you know, they're not going to give us what we want. We have to grab it. Which I think both are important. Obviously there's a lot more to Hanna and Minza, you know, it's not just politics. They have they have different senses of humor, and they have this playful energy about them, which obviously I relate to. Okay. But yeah, I think I still feel the tension, like that. I have a Hanna inside me and I have a Minza inside me, and they're both sort of like tugging at me at different times, and they're both useful to have, I think, as tools.
Yeah, I think we all have a Hanna and Minza inside us. You made this really amazing point about the early stages of writing the play. It was a one-woman show. It was very much based on you, and now you've kind of gone through this process of creating a full version of the show. You obviously had a version of the show on last year. It's gone into R&D, and now you have this version that's coming to Tara Theatre very soon, which we're really excited about. So as a playwright, as a sort of emerging playwright, what was that process like from you to take it out of this one woman monologue, stand-up style thing, and then sort of really kind of delve into the process of creating a story with two characters? I'm really interested in that process for you. What was that like?
It's insane as a new playwright to see your words coming out of an actor's mouth.
Yeah.
Like, my mind was blown when that happened. And I think, like, the journey of Permission, from where it started as that one-woman show to what it is now, it's so much richer and deeper, is not because I became great as a playwright. It's because, like, people were involved and people embodied those characters. And we put on the show last year, we saw it on stage multiple times, and we were able to go through that journey enough times to see what it needed. And then this R&D process that we did in Feb, where we had the brains of the actors, we had our amazing director, everyone just was fully immersed in this world. That was game-changing. Like, that really sort of, made it so much more multi-dimensional. So I would say it's like a collective act. I think Permission is like a collectively made script to some extent. And for me, I think it's just been a massive learning experience. Like, I have no formal training in playwriting. I'm just kind of doing it because I love it. And so I've just been learning on the go, and it's been really, really cool to see it come where it is today.
And sometimes that is the best way to write, is to just sort of go with it. But thank you, that's really brilliant. You talked a little bit about the R&D, the two actors, your brilliant director, Neetu Singh, who's working on this with you. So this essentially is an all-powerful, female-led creative team. Have you found that working with a team like that, has that changed the process at all in any way? Or in what way has it made this process positive for you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everyone on the team is friends with each other, and everyone respects each other, and I think everyone brings so much to the table, just as people, not only as women. I think the benefit of, this is going to sound horrible, but the benefit of working with all women teams can be that, you don't have to deal with male egos. But
that's not horrible. That's not a horrible thing to say.
Yeah, maybe it's fair.
Don't worry, we love all our male colleagues very much.
Not all men, though. I'm joking. Yeah, it's been really, really cool for me to learn from them. I think everyone in my team has way more experience than me. And just over the last couple of years, I've just been like watching them and just absorbing just what it means to hold a room, like the way Neetu holds a room, the way Ria like can look at a script and ask like very intelligent questions, the way Anisa can embody an emotion. All of these things have like taught me so much. And also a creative team, like majority women, and even the guys, like everyone is super talented, super invested in the show. So yeah, I'm just grateful, to be honest.
That's really great. Thank you, Hunia. It's been so great to talk to you, get a bit more insight into how you created the piece, what the piece means to you as well. I cannot wait to have Permission on at Tara Theatre. It's a brilliant piece of work. I think there's something in it for everyone. It'll spark conversation, but yeah, absolutely. We're gonna have loads of fun as well watching it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Natasha, appreciate it. Permission opens at the Tara Theatre on the 30th of May to the 7th of June. It's a really special piece about friendship, protest, feminism. It's a good time and you don't want to miss it. Hope to see you there.